This is episode 743 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Dringmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. And Wally, we have to certainly start with just what a week last week was. Now, always you look at the calendar and see where 9/11 will be commemorated, and you know that's going to be a somber week. Of course, early last week, the young woman from Ukraine who was killed brutally on a train while many other passengers kind of sat and watched. That was troubling enough. And then, obviously, last Wednesday afternoon, when Charlie Kirk was shot, and then it was known that he was actually killed in assassination. That was obviously something that not just anybody involved in conservative policy and politics was affected by, but the entire country, and it seems like the entire world. So we can get into some aspects of how that will impact things in a few seconds, but definitely a really somber and tragic week last week in a way that very few weeks are.
Yeah, Paul, I felt sick to my stomach many times last week. Yeah, some horrific things happened, and you know, I think the thing that makes them all the more horrific is they're not necessarily, what shall we say? Well, Kirk for sure, but even the killing of the woman, they don't seem like they're random acts of violence. Oh yes, it was random, but there's this whole breakdown of I don't know, law enforcement and ethics around death, and so it was a tough one for me. It was a very similar situation how I felt when I heard that the space shuttle
Mm-hmm.
exploded. It was just like, oh, that is absolutely horrible on so many levels, and yeah, very many bad things happened that last week. It was not a good week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I happen to be at a Federation of Republican Women event that I'd been invited to. One of our listeners, actually, an orthopedic surgeon from Farmington, was in town talking about the medical provider crisis in New Mexico and some of the issues associated with that. And towards the end of the event, I happened to check out my phone and see that there were alerts about Charlie Kirk being shot. And, you hear that and you hope for the best and not really expecting somebody to ultimately pass away. But then within a few hours, that's exactly what happened. So, in terms of kind of broader implications and more details, I did not know, nor do I think I ever saw Charlie Kirk. I know he came here to Legacy Church a few times. Folks may understand if you're involved professionally in the political world, you probably understand it. You try to not do a lot of politically related things in your private time, your family time. And of course, with three kids, running to various athletic events and school and the whole nine yards, that's a separate thing. So I was pleasantly surprised, just kind of talking about Charlie Kirk with my kids. They not only did they all know who he was and feel very strongly about him and his impact, but it was discussed by teachers at school and other kids in the classroom. And my oldest is a sophomore in high school, but even my eighth grader, kind of had a pretty good grasp on who Charlie Kirk was and some of the things that he said and did. I would say that the most fundamental difference is that Charlie Kirk, aside from obviously the scope and scale, he was obviously an internationally regarded figure and listened to by millions of people all over the world. We're much more focused on New Mexico here. We're also much more We are nonpartisan. We avow some of the same policies, not necessarily on the social side of things. We don't touch transgender issues, which obviously I think that is a big factor in what happened to Charlie Kirk. But I do think that it is something that anybody who goes and does public events and speeches, typically with no security presence, or minimal, it's something that is going to change and never going to be the same, especially with the fact that President Trump was nearly assassinated just over a year ago. Charlie Kirk now, basically the same style of situation. A sniper rifle can, you know, even with a mediocre shot, generally speaking, hit a target at a pretty long distance. And, you can say, well, the Secret Service didn't do their job. They didn't do a very good job of securing the perimeter. And that's probably accurate for my understanding. But an individual like Charlie Kirk is not going to have access to that kind of level of security and never will. And you question whether people, broadly speaking, are going to be willing to speak out in public absent a much more significant security presence in a lot of ways. It's something that is one factor. And secondly, I do think a lot of Americans, a lot of people across the planet have really gotten more concerned, and that they see free speech and they see especially conservative thought as being under attack in this country. And there's obviously been a backlash on social media. You have some number, I don't think it's a very high percentage, but some number of people, seemingly hard left progressives, who celebrating Kirk's murder, Kirk's assassination, and being taken to task for that, including being called out on social media, and then in many cases losing their jobs. So I think people, certainly in the online spaces, are really they've had enough, and they're going to speak out and punish people. So hopefully that doesn't go over the top. But I think there's a balancing act there.
Yes, kind of a few things in order, Paul. First of all, Charlie Kirk, he was a talented human being.
31 years old.
Didn't go to college. Probably the most well-read generically on things related to economics, policy, government of anyone I've ever seen. I'm not saying he knew the most of anyone, but man, he could capture, he could pull out of his brain facts on the spot. And he's not one of those like, well, I need to look at my notes here. He knew a lot. And so, and then also he had a talent for debate. He had a position. He had a place where he came from. He had policies that he advocated for, and he would go and talk to people about them. And he was super effective. And so the other thing you mentioned, your daughter. I know some people that contacted me that I'm various levels of close to, that were very shaken up by that, and so he had quite a following amongst a lot of young people. The second point now is that, you know on the big side of things is free speech under attack. And what's you mentioned, there was a lot of mourning, not only in the U.S. but internationally. I saw a video from South Korea that they were chanting "We are Charlie Kirk." So it's interesting to know that he had that big of an impact. And in Europe and other places that have been associated with much more free speech politically, it seems like he resonated there as well, because those places were under it, are seeming, from my perspective here across the pond, under attack. It seems like free speech in a place like Great Britain, England, is a far shadow of what it used to be in the past. So that's the other thing. And then finally, Man, I don't think, other than speaking to the Women's Rose Society, I don't think I would like to speak outside if there were rooftops around
Mm-hmm.
where I am. I mean, almost any talk of any kind anymore. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And it's very tough to secure. You know, they didn't keep the president safe from it with a big security force, and when you have no security force, it's it's not that big of a deal. And then it's interesting. There's always, and I'm not going to get into the gun control debate about that. That's come up, but I do want to say that the firearm used was not a firearm that was an automatic weapon or a
Mm-mm.
semi-automatic weapon. It was, a bolt action, which is one of the oldest technologies, hundreds of years old, and so that's the case. And then finally, yeah, it's the whole thing about, do guns kill people or do people kill people? Well, people with knives kill people as well. So it's one of those things. You know, there's and then
Well, on that note, let me
yes.
let me
Oh, and
jump in
then
there
one
because
final
oh, go
one
ahead.
final point. So and then
Yeah.
I have noticed that the new talking point is they're not the in Washington, they're not calling it gun control. They're calling it gun safety. That's a
Mm-hmm.
new term that's come out. And
Mm.
I don't know what that means. Gun safety is don't point loaded guns at people and keep them locked up. I don't know. I have a feeling it means more than that, but that's a new talking point.
Yeah, on the issue of guns, and obviously we support the Second Amendment here at the Rio Grande Foundation. We are not experts in the way that our friends at the New Mexico Shooting Sports
Mhm.
Association and other pro-gun organizations are, but uh, it does constantly get dragged out anytime there's an event like this, and they don't actually mention what they want to do. The advocates for gun control, most often they will say common sense gun control, or maybe they'll throw something, one specific policy out. But the reality is that many of these incidents, this individual who killed Charlie Kirk had no prior criminal record. Even the recent shooting at the church up in Minneapolis, that person had no prior criminal record. Uh, you know, we do have a gun culture in the United States. There's absolutely no question about that. And maybe there would be less guns available if we had less of a gun culture and if somehow you changed that. But then, of course, you get a whole crop of additional problems. Uh, the guns, though, have been around for a very long time. Guns have been ubiquitous in American culture for many years. And there've always been some number of shootings. I mean, obviously, getting back to Al Capone and gangsters, and then the breakdown of safety in big cities in the 1960s and 70s. This problem, and it's not obviously just guns. There were bombs set off and all kinds of other things that happened. America has a certain level of violence associated with it that you just don't find in Western European countries, or even in places like Canada. So it is a much more complicated thing to address gun issues than simply, oh, we're going to get rid of guns. Well, there's more guns than people in this country, and even if you stopped selling guns universally across the country tomorrow, there's no there's no stopping the number of guns that are available, and then that doesn't even factor in the black market and whatnot. So it they're the people who want to take your guns often have these very pie in the sky approaches and just kind of flowery words that they want to throw out there. It's very rarely, here are the five or the six or the three or the four gun policies that will stop 80 to 90% of the shootings. That's just not the reality. And it's just something that I don't know why, aside from politics, they keep throwing that out there. Obviously, the number one thing that we can do is to keep people who commit gun crimes and other crimes regularly, like the individual on the light rail in Charlotte who killed a Ukrainian woman. even though it was with a knife, keep people who are repeat offenders locked up. And we have this problem here in Albuquerque. We have this problem across the country. There's no magical solution, just like so many of the problems we face in our society, though.
No, but it just must test well with their base. It must, because they keep trotting it out. And the other thing is, along the lines you're talking about, Paul, is there is a culture and tolerance of violence in the U.S. That maybe does not exist in Europe. But when you talk about what do we do about this, one of the things that's just if the strictest gun control was in and of itself would do something. Places like Mexico as a country and Chicago as a city wouldn't have gun crimes.
Right.
And there's laws, and then there's enforcement, and then there's systemic actions. And so this is very interesting. And then the as I read the Second Amendment, and I won't say the throwaway, well, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but the way I read the Second Amendment is that it definitely was a political statement of having guns. It's one of those. It's for self-defense, but from others, and the ability to protect yourself from others, as well as from tyranny from a government. So that's something that I think is well established, and we don't. There is no easy solution, and I do have a feeling that if there were no guns, places that don't have many guns, that have a culture of violence, it's amazing how quickly knives emerge. And so I don't know. It's this is a big problem, but it's not going to be solved with memes. And when we talk about things like gun safety, what does that mean? What is your proposal, and why do you think that works? You know what? That's always a good rule of thumb for any policy you want to propose, and particularly in this one.
All right. Well, just a tough week. Our condolences to the Kirk family and all who were close to him, and of course, others, including the Ukrainian woman who were killed. And it will be something that we watch and see how this event, probably the most high-profile political assassination. I don't remember the exact order, but certainly Bobby Kennedy is one of the most recent major assassinations that I think has occurred in American history. Thankfully, it had been a while since there was a successful, if you want to call it that, assassination. Reagan, of course, it was attempted, and blessedly he survived. But
he was moments away from death. If they would have actually followed protocol, he would have died. But somebody made a split second decision, or he would have not made it as well. So so there is a history in our country, no question about it.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, moving on to, I don't know if it's more optimistic or more depressing topics, but New Mexico politics and policy. And of course, I think it's safe to say that this announcement by the governor is she's looking for a signature policy success or a win before she leaves office. And I will go so far as to say that she is using this as a diversionary tactic to essentially overcome her failures, especially with CYFD, especially with New Mexico's education system, which has declined dramatically under her time in office. Not a whole lot of successes in MLG's administration, but she got a lot of positive attention from the national media thanks to her free childcare proposal. Now, unfortunately, having interacted as you have with national reporters coming to New Mexico, and I'm not saying they're more versed in New York or California's policies, but they certainly don't know what the hell is going on here in New Mexico. and don't read much, just kind of go into things. So they don't understand that we already have childcare available for people making up to 400% of the federal poverty level, which is for a family of three over $100,000, between 106 and 120 or so. They also didn't read the New Mexican article, and kudos to the Santa Fe New Mexican. They've done a lot of good work on several issues here. This is from September 13th. Title: Santa Fe, New Mexico. New Mexico has slipped in increasing child care capacity, analysts say. Well, don't say. So here's a couple of quotes. The state's early childhood education and care department has struggled in recent years to make good on its goal of expanding child care access to as many New Mexicans as possible. This is, of course, under the existing policy. Analysts with the LFC told lawmakers Friday the state has shown lackluster progress in increasing child care capacity and a decline in low-income families taking advantage of state-subsidized child care in recent years. They say that funding levels remain sufficient, but they have just not had as many people taking advantage of the program. And it's actually declined by 3% in terms of the number of slots between the fall of 2019 and spring of 2023. And there are a few decline of 50% in the number of registered homes, which are child care settings with and having fewer children. So there you go. We have a program that's struggling to serve the population that is already eligible for the program. Let's just expand it to everybody and we'll call it a success.
Yes, and this is not unique for government programs, but
that's an understatement.
Yeah,
Wally.
well, but Paul, it's like health insurance is not health care.
Mm-hmm.
Child care plan is not child care. There have to be people that provide it. There have to be people that utilize it. And to say that the government is clumsy when they try to do things like that, that would be being kind in terms of that. So, I don't know. So what do we have? So we have less providers because I do know that there a lot of these. A lot of child care is done in the homes, these small kind of child care businesses that are out of homes, and there's lots of regulation and lots of limits on what you can do and can't do, and it's a tough business to be in, and just saying that declaring victory and go home. That's kind of what we're doing on this one. So I'm with you. It's like, this is not going to be a huge impact, I don't think. And that, guess what, Paul? If you provide something it's at a cost that's less than the cost of the market, you might end up having more demand than you have supply. Guess what? It sort of seems like we're probably seeing that already.
Sure.
Between the regulations and the cost, the pricing limits that to be in the state system that you have. So let's open it up to everybody, and somehow that's going to make it better. We will see. We will see. So,
well, one of the things that absolutely needs to be addressed is what were the impacts of the pre-existing 400% free healthcare? Because that's not federal poverty level, 400% of federal poverty level free childcare. Because do we have data showing that this has had some real positive impacts on New Mexico families' ability to get into the workplace for women, et cetera, et cetera? I'll be the first to admit, I did not know New Mexico already offered free childcare for families below 400% of the federal poverty level. I've never seen an analysis from the LFC as to what, if any, positive outcomes were associated with this. We certainly have had and continue to have an extremely low workforce participation rate. Are they really claiming that for now expanding it to over 400% of the federal poverty level, that you're going to have a sudden uptick in people entering the workforce, well, you would think that we might have some data on that, right? What are the outcomes for children? Are we able to keep these children safe? And I think that is the biggest question, really, is there's going to be this pressure to let people be in this field because there's undoubtedly going to be a shortage, as there appears to already be a shortage of facilities and people in the child care profession. Are they going to cut corners and allow people who should not be in that business, either due to training, temperament, or criminal background, or all of the above, in this business? And how many issues are we going to have with that moving forward? So there are a lot of questions. I truly hope that the legislature has a serious conversation about this in the 30-day session. As I mentioned last week, George Munoz, Senate Finance Committee, has already expressed some questions about this issue. Will he stand up? Will he find other Democrats willing to stand up? Will this be kind of just a few Senate voices of reason standing up against essentially the entire Democratic Party and the governor? Or will this be something that is seriously analyzed and considered in the 30-day session? So I don't know. And I don't know, pre-K or not pre-K, the other policy, paid sick leave.
Yeah.
It feels like it's so long ago now with all the other crazy stuff they keep throwing at us. But how many big, hairy issues are they going to throw at us in this 30-day session, I think, is another very reasonable question.
Well, and Paul, this next issue is not unique to New Mexico, but we seem like we have a really, really bad case of it. Is somebody will propose a policy, and they're very good at outlining their intentions for that policy. What do we want to have happen? We're going to do this universal child care, and it's going to be wonderful for all these reasons. But then we never do look at once a program like that's been in place for a while, as you said so astutely, what are the outcomes and what are the impacts? That's the part we always miss. And then the other thing is a lot of times on these policies, when they're gone into effect, they've been, I'm not as sure about this one, but a lot of other things have been tried other places. And the impacts of and outcomes of policies that have been tried other places that are proposed in New Mexico become pretty well known, but we seem really to avoid looking at that as well. So it's all policies and intentions, and man, it's rare that we get beyond that in the political process here in New Mexico.
And I did a quick Google search. As it turns out, New Mexico started offering its current free childcare for up to 400% of the federal poverty level on May 1st, 2022. Certainly not a incredibly long time, just a little 3.5 years or so. But you would expect that there might have been some data, some information, some way to actually judge the efficacy of said program at this point. I have seen absolutely zero on that. So, all right, moving forward, we'll toot our own horn for just a second here. The Rio Grande Foundation's in a few court battles, which we have engaged with. The first is super duper timely. We, of course, just had Riley Stevens on, and you can check out last week's interview about our case against the city of Albuquerque donating $250,000 to Planned Parenthood. Well, over the weekend, or probably it was announced on Friday, Governor Lujan Grisham decided to highlight a new plan that she has in place. And apparently she's not going to go to the legislature on this. She is going to fill in the gaps from the big, beautiful bill that cut federal funding for Planned Parenthood. So again, we're not here to necessarily pick on Planned Parenthood, but it does seem like our politicians in New Mexico have a unique drive to use or donate tax dollars to that particular nonprofit. We are waiting word from our attorneys as to what application might there be for our lawsuit if it is decided in the manner that we hope it will be, uh, relating to the statewide donation, if you will, to Planned Parenthood. So more to follow on that, but that is one particular court case, and it's suddenly, in my estimation, been given additional weight by this recent announcement of the governor. But I'll give you a chance to weigh in on that. Then we have a couple of other things that we're working on relating to the judiciary.
Yeah, Paul, I would just say that if things like this continue to go on, we continue to see uh, kind of what's happened in Washington is things kind of bypass the legislative system, even though that's constitutionally the way spending is supposed to be authorized first in the House and with concurrence of the Senate. And we're seeing that the executive branches are getting more and more power. And if people are not challenging that, it gets to be a concentration of a power, not the beautiful check on power that having three branches of governments decided are designed to do. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens with this. What does the legislature do? But at what point then just do we not even need special sessions? We'll just have the executive decide how to spend our money, and we'll get back to you in a couple years.
Absolutely. So, uh, other court cases include one we are still in litigation against Maggie Toulouse Oliver, Secretary of State, over free speech and campaign restrictions. The 10th Circuit issued a decision recently. The bad news is we lost. The good news is that not only was there a dissent from one judge, but there was a concurring opinion by another that said he was bound by precedent, which is why he joined the majority, but that he thought the precedent was wrong. So we are going to be appealing that one, more to come on it. Finally, we have been engaged in friend of the court briefs, amicus briefs relating to President Trump's unilateral tariffs. Uh, Purely on a constitutional level, yes, we believe that tariffs are taxes. Tariffs are tremendously economically harmful to the economy. We support free trade at the Rio Grande Foundation. But the case specifically is about the unilateral ability of the President of the United States to impose taxes, at least in this case, the form of tariffs, on the American people under the auspices of pretty vague emergency laws. We believe that constitutionally, Congress needs to retrain and manage its own taxing authority, and that you can't have presidents of either party, Republican or Democrat, just willy-nilly imposing taxes on people. And if you think that President Trump, that this is uh, just a Trump-related item, if you would like to allow AOC to simply impose taxes from the executive branch, or Kamala Harris, or whoever the next Democrat may be, Gavin Newsom, I don't know what the nightmare scenario looks like, the worst one, but none of them are good. And we believe that Congress should be ultimately responsible for these policies. So I think this is for the good of the republic, the good of the future economy. This needs to be done with the legislative branch. And so we've gladly signed on to these amicus briefs, and this one has been expedited to the U.S. Supreme Court. And we'll all know in a few, I think a couple of months, what the result of this particular issue will be.
Yeah, Paul, these tariffs, this has been quite a roller coaster ride in terms of up and down and what's going to happen. And there's also I believe there's a case pending about will they need to be refunds of tariffs
Mhm.
before the Supreme Court. And so, yes, I want to say two things. In general, I totally support free trade. Although I do think that in some cases we have other countries have gotten the better of us slowly but surely over the years with the U.S.'s free trade in terms of not standing up for ourselves, and I do think that's an issue to be addressed. But the other fact is that this is one of those as well that um, the executive at the federal level, at the state level, at other levels, other states around the country, it's incredible. The legislators, both, they need to stand up. They need to start doing their job at some point, and we're not seeing a lot of that.
Yeah, exactly. So, to be continued on that. We shall see. Had a opinion piece in the Albuquerque Journal recently, in which I made the case that progressive policies are killing Albuquerque. I know that was a really tough case to make. Let me tell you, Wally. Just kidding. It's pretty self-evident, but I still had to write the article. I didn't use AI to do it, although I probably could have gotten something out of AI if I'd wanted to. Uh, here's the case. First and foremost, unfortunately, R.J. Berry, despite being ostensibly a Republican, fell into the progressive trap of trying to remake Central Avenue by ramming his ART bus system through. We attempted to prevent that and stop it. We had a very big battle, and unfortunately, we lost. R.J. Berry did it. Of course, as is often the case, we were proven right in the end. ART, and then the 1-2 punch of that and COVID really did a number on Central, to the point where there are very few nice areas on Central, with the slight exception of parts of Nob Hill, although that area struggles mightily with the issues that line Central all up and down. I then noted that the Balloon Fiesta, because of the 100th anniversary of Route 66, they're not having, most people who live around here know that Route 66 is Central Avenue through Albuquerque, right? Right. Well, there were other routes of Route 66 that are less known and less famous.
Yeah, Fourth Street, for
4th
example.
Street.
Yes.
And no surprise there, in Los Ranchos de Albuquerque, that's where they're having the Balloon Fiesta celebration of Route 66. I don't think it would have been wise for them to do it along most of the rest of Route 66. So there's that. And then, of course, the infusion of money, $83,000 per homeless person that they're trying to get off the streets. And the amount of money that the Keller administration has spent, the fact that for the state fair, the transit department was working to hire 25 new security guards. They also had private security and National Guard troops all deployed on city buses, which I know the buses never been perfect. They are mass transit, but they have deteriorated dramatically under Keller's free bus program. Anyway, check out the Albuquerque Journal. You can also see the article at Heirs of Enchantment and Rio Grande Foundation.org. I could have written a 5,000 word essay on the topic, but I had to limit it to something shorter, 650 words. And I believe the ART was the biggest and most significant, but Keller has done nothing to improve not just Central, but really the rest of the city during his 8 years in office. And it's time to go a different direction. Anything to add? Or I know we got a
well said. I think you could have done a 32,000 word book as well. Just
a book.
Yeah.
Well, Keller tried a book and see how that worked out for him. Federal dollars shouldn't be used for bike trails in the first place. I do believe in constitutional differentiation of what governments do, and I think getting away from this has been a huge problem. Going back to the interstate highway system, which is probably the most singly successful federal program in the history of this country. Yes, the federal government had a role to play in that, but they should have essentially stepped back and allowed, within certain parameters, states to manage the ongoing maintenance issues there. Unfortunately, both the state and the federal government have decided that any transportation or any pork project through the earmark project is fair game. The Trump administration has rightfully, I believe, canceled the $11.5 million from the 7-mile, $60 to $90 million bike trail that the mayor has so eagerly supported. Uh, and I believe that Trump is absolutely 100% correct on this. There will be litigation. I realize that you can argue that this is related to the sanctuary city discussion, and that may actually be why Trump is doing this. Even if you're doing it for different reasons, the idea that the federal government should ever be involved in financing a bike trail is silly. The state should not be involved in it either. The capital outlay money should be used for projects by and large that benefit the entire state, not one little part of one city in the state of New Mexico. I realize that this is a horse that has left the barn and we're fighting rearguard action here, but at the very least, the federal government stepping aside and forcing this to be funded by the city, or presumably the state at some point when the governor gets a hold of the capital outlay bill, she would, I'm sure, just throw another $11.5 million at it. But this is an issue.
Yeah, Paul, and I don't think the case has been, in addition to that, I don't think this is a very cool project. To be honest, I love the bike trails next to the bosque, both the paved ones and then there's dirt ones within the bosque. I've ridden my bike in those. Those are fantastic. Guess what? Where the railroad tracks go, it's out there where the railroad tracks are. There aren't trees. There's not very much to see, and unless I'm dramatically missing something, I just don't think this is a very cool project. I want to list a few projects and see if we think this one may kind of, if it does get done, end up being viewed in the same. You have the spaceport, you have the rail runner, you have ART. Now we have the rail trail. It's like, is this going to be just another failed project that we spend a lot of money for and didn't do our homework? And as you say, the funding sources being nebulous. If it was so wonderful, we wouldn't need federal money.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, we have, because we haven't tortured Central Avenue enough, let's redevelop the fairgrounds. So that's the other one. So we have a couple of big government knows better kind of projects right now on the table, and it'll be interesting to see. First of all, not only how are they funded, but if they do go forward, are they even going to do anything? Or are they just going to be other things where it's like, man, I wish somebody should have said maybe we ought to think about this a little harder before we start these projects.
So if you go to Google AI and look up cost of a mile of bike trail paved, it comes back with a 12-foot wide concrete trail with grading and drainage can cost roughly $528,000 per mile. Asphalt trails range from $149,000 to over $300,000 per mile. Complex urban bike paths or those with many features can exceed $1 million per mile. Well, you don't have to be a math major to know that for 7 miles, if you're spending between $60 and $90 million per mile, or one's total, that's over $10 million per mile of bike trail. And it obviously is a rail trail. So you're not acquiring any right of way. You're building it essentially where the railroad tracks once were. And yeah, obviously this is a complete and total boondoggle.
All right. And then Paul, just to put that amount of money into context, if it's $90 million, and let's say we wanted to buy a lot of $750 bikes, not cheap bikes, expensive bikes, that would buy 120,000 bicycles.
Yeah.
So it's like, that is a lot of money for a 7-mile out in the sun in a dangerous part of town bike trail.
Yeah. All right. Last story here. We talked last week about the governor offering big time wage increases, salary increases to employees. The 26% salary increase, most notable. Again, kudos to the Santa Fe New Mexican. Their Roundhouse report contained this story. in which they looked at the individual who received the 26% wage increase. And this is some just wild, wild stuff that I think is really should be troubling to anybody who cares about good government. But I put this in an Errors of Enchantment post. So this young woman who is the daughter of the head of the Pueblo governors. So a position, he's his name is Mountain. Her name is Mountain as well. James Mountain. He's the chairman of the All Pueblo Council of Governors. And this woman was also a volunteer for Representative Andrea Romero's legislative campaign. So this woman, as of April of 2024, she has no college degree. She was working at the Whole Hog Cafe up in Santa Fe. I looked up what is assistant manager, which is the position she held at the Whole Hog Cafe, earn $41,600 annually. She goes over to government after April of 2024. So we're talking a year and a half from ago. Starts with annual salary of $60,000. No college diploma, no nothing. So a massive pay hike with much better benefits at the state level, healthcare, etc. And government's not going out of business. Whole Hog Cafe apparently has, or the Santa Fe one has gone out of business. So that's a 44% pay increase. Then she gets over time, small salary increases. And then she gets the big one to balloon from $61,800. By May, her salary had ballooned to $75,000. And then she went up a little further to $78,000. So in a year and a half, she went from earning about $41,000 to earning $78,000 in government. And you'll note that I mentioned this last week when we talked about it. In the original article from the Journal, Albuquerque Journal, Michael Coleman, spokesman for the Lujan Grisham, said these seasoned professionals could command higher compensation in the private sector, but choose public service. Well, there are many, many cases. This is a great case study. Again, thank you to the Santa Fe New Mexican for some of this information. But yeah, you're not going from $41,000 to $78,000 and ramping up your benefits and job security in the private sector. This is a very unique case of government richly rewarding something, presumably relating to, but not exclusively due to political connections. But yeah, that's a nice job if you can get it there, Wally.
Yeah, the only thing that's more expensive is a homeless person in Albuquerque. That's $83,000 a year.
There you go.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that kind of government versus private sector thing, that might play in a place that has an active private sector, but New Mexico, we really don't. And so, this is interesting. And it's interesting that the top officials that serve the governor are getting these big raises. And as I've said before, because of how the pension system works, particularly those that have been with government for a while, if they get a big raise, that is giving them a boatload of money in terms of additional retirement. Probably not as much this woman, but the fact is that if you're one of the confidants of the governor, you do very, very well, even relative to the rest of the state government employees.
Yeah. Well, we will have to leave it there. We've already had a very lengthy show. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.